Your articulation bends like a broken circuit, snapped the Varn delegate, his tri-jawed mouth clicking in sync with the laughter that followed. Was that supposed to be Terran standard, or just your species choking on its own syntax? Duran Castle didn't flinch. He stood beneath the silver-beamed array of the Thoraxis Core Convergence Hall, the ambient chill brushing against his skin like the whisper of a winter dry leaf. Every eye in the amphitheater, compound, bioptic, thermal sensitive, turned to him, not with curiosity, but ridicule. Behind his back, the laser display still pulsed the last diagram of his lecture, a cascading waveform comparing Terran vowel stress with post-telepathic regression dialects. It flickered once, then dimmed. No one clapped. He could hear breathing, throatless gasps from aquatic species filtering air, a rasping gill hitch from the Atheli scholars on row 6. One of them coughed deliberately, imitating his pause mid-sentence. Another delegate mimed a shaky human accent with cartoonish emphasis, their head crest fluttering, and still, Duran stood. He wasn't military, no black creased command jacket, no emblems of battle campaigns or mission service stripes, just a matte gray field coat, worn thin at the elbows, and a neckband fitted with an Earth-standard translation modulator. He reached to deactivate it. Then he spoke, unmodulated. Earth's phonological architecture is based on layered intention. We speak not for sound, but for sequence. You mock inflection, but you miss the structure beneath. His voice was calm, but the accent was unmistakable. Terran, deep core, subharmonic edge from a childhood spent in the submerged echo chambers of Atlantica 12. Another wave of laughter. Intention? That was a vocal injury. Torvek Hun's mandibles clicked in amusement. We should archive that sound under field recordings. Primitive mammals. The statement sparked a feed burst. A dozen delegates flicked gestures into their wrist interfaces. Within seconds, a clip of Duran's sentence was replayed, over and over, each iteration warped further for comedic effect. One even auto-tuned it to a pre-contact Terran music pattern, layering synthetic beats beneath his vowels. Duran closed the modulator clasp and stepped away from the lectern. Not a single Earth delegate followed, because there weren't any. He descended the ramp slowly, footsteps measured, every stride echoing in the artificial acoustics of the chamber. Outside, the translucent walls shimmered with the movement of orbital traffic. The filtered sunlight from Thoraxis's violet giant refracted off incoming freighter spines, casting angular shadows across the council insignia etched into the chamber's floor. No one tried to stop him. No one cared. Not even the council moderator raised objection. As Duran crossed the lobby, a junior envoy from the Kersuan sector, barely of voting rank, whispered something to a fellow delegate. Something about gutter tongue and Earth's failed bids. The other smirked. Duran didn't look back. The lift doors closed behind him, with a hiss that felt sharper than it should have. As the chamber ascended, he glanced at his wrist module, keyed in a silent command, and watched as the sub-channel tagged, Theta Marek 9, passive trigger confirmed. Still, no emotion touched his face. On the upper promenade, a row of illuminated plinths displayed language relics from across the galaxy, harmonized glyph shells from Uthari Prime, compressed pulse tapes from the machine diaspora worlds, scent-coated memory orbs from the Tanis colonies. Between them sat Earth's exhibit, barely touched, a simple audio crystal etched with Terran syllables rotating under a glass prism. Most visitors skipped it. A child from the Zinari collective stopped to press their fingers to the console. Duran walked past in silence. Through the corridor's archway, the council conference hall shimmered with renewed activity. Multiple delegates now shared the viral clip, laughing through closed throat pouches, shoulder crests, and oscillating feather spines. The subtitle read, "Primitive Speech Pattern Makes It Into Council." It reached 5 million feeds before Duran stepped into the shuttle pad airlock. The scent here was sharp with oxidized vent residue, ozone filtered, not acrid, just clinical, artificial, sterile, the kind of non-place that held no memory. A cargo hauler hovered mid-pivot across the bay, its pilot unaware of anything but arrival vectors. No fanfare, no departure salute. Duran simply boarded, sat, and watched the inner hatch seal him off from Thoraxis core. No announcements, no reaction, no Earth delegation to file a protest. Just data being compiled, sound waves being traced, social replication matrices being modeled by subroutines that hadn't activated in over 70 years. Back in the convergence hall, Torvek Hun clicked again, amused at the ripple effect of a joke so easily spread. He didn't notice the way the council display had begun tagging accent patterns in metadata, or how Earth's linguistic node had updated from dormant to observing. No one did. The chamber's lighting, adjusted to midday calibration. Outside, the freighters aligned with orbital dock lattice. Gravity buffers cycled, all routine. And somewhere deep beneath the Antarctic crust of Earth's southern research quadrant, the subharmonic pulse of Theta Merechnine shifted from silent monitoring to encoded mirroring. Not speech, not sound, a rhythm, barely measurable, entirely untraceable. They had mocked a sound, not knowing the sound itself was a system, a map, a sequence woven with the weight of forgotten caution, a key, and now, it had been copied. Loop it again. Add thermal distortion and compress the vowels. Rannick Vrel leaned forward, his forearm plates clicking against the edge of his editing console. The media suite, perched above Varn Prime's Civic Tower, buzzed with real-time feed calibrations and trending signal alerts. His crest adjusted unconsciously, a subtle twitch, triggered by the rising feed metrics pulsing on the heads-up wall display. Earth's delegate had spoken 22 hours ago. The reaction was now planetary. On screen, the clip replayed. Duran Castle's voice, dry, calm, laced with a Terran cadence, unspooled across the chamber again. We speak not for sound, but for sequence. Overlaid laugh tracks, distorted vowel filters, and beat pulse transitions followed. The final cut ended with a clip from a pre-council satire channel, a Terran eating his own translator badge. Upload batch 11, Vrel said without looking. Target Council and non-aligned border species. Clip title, Ancient Earth Syntax Breaks Public Decorum. Add echo tags. His assistant, a younger broadcaster with faded vocal band tattoos, nodded once and tapped into the feed line. The audio mod engine calibrated the layers. As it finished, a ripple of heat from the overhead filter vents brushed against Rannick's scalp, not warm, but dry, almost dusty, as if the air was strained through abandoned memory. Outside, 100 drone towers rebroadcasted variations of the same clip. Every council city with uplink privileges mirrored the meme in local accents. Even fringe systems had started inserting it into low-tier entertainment cycles. It wasn't the content that mattered, it was the tone, just awkward enough, just alien enough to punch through feed fatigue. Inside Earth's deep semantics division, buried below sea ice where no signal reached without encryption latency, a light blinked 3 times. Theta Myric 9, monitoring status confirmed. The shuttle carrying Duran touched down at Earth's southern polar ingress, its hull immediately blanketed by drifting snow crystals, dry as powdered bone. The landing pads, reinforced with heat ribbon emitters, hissed softly as his boots made contact. No escort, no lights. As he stepped off the ramp, a data relay burst from his wrist module into the subterranean gate lock. The blast door acknowledged with a triple-tone sequence, then slid apart without ceremony. The corridor smelled like old circuitry and disinfected oxygen, sterile, but not dead, just waiting. Each step deeper brought him past dormant consoles, cold display chambers, and observation domes shielded behind laser filament. The silence wasn't emptiness, it was loaded with anticipation, like a word paused mid-syllable. Baron Das stood near the intake platform, one hand resting lightly on the access rail. His breath didn't fog. Environmental stasis here kept the air dry and thin, ideal for waveform calibration. You wore it? Baron asked, glancing at the neckband still fastened under Duran's collar. I needed them to hear it raw. They did more than hear it, Baron replied, gesturing toward a laser plasma display. It rippled with viral spread projections, linguistic resonance overlays, and a single glowing sphere at the center. Castle's unmodified voice print. They've replicated the waveform across 53 cultures in less than 1 day. Duran stepped forward. The console shifted, now revealing a spiraling projection of tonal mutations, the Varn's mocking echoes layered against other species' imitations. Like viruses adapting in real time, each one nested the original Terran stress marker deeper into its structure. They don't know they're feeding it, Duran murmured. They don't even know what it is, Baron replied. Back on Varn Prime, Rannick Vrel was being awarded a trending spike by the global media sphere, a rare commendation issued when a meme crossed 10 billion impressions within 2 sleep cycles. He accepted it via uplink, broadcasting a public grin, while his private console streamed new remix submissions, each more distorted than the last. One feed replaced Duran's voice with animal screeches, another spliced it over footage of failed Terran diplomacy. The mockery evolved, language bent. No one noticed the failures in phoneme recognition among their own auto-translators. No one flagged the minor echoing glitches when their own voices fed back into council archives. A few speech AIs started requesting calibration, but support systems marked it as routine drift. In Earth's archive chamber, Malric Sen reviewed the cascade logs. His fingers moved across the cold interface in slow patterns, triggering audio diagnostics on every instance where Duran's voice had been synthetically reused. The frequency signatures pulsed like heat signatures on a winter field, ghostly, predictable, and spreading. "No interference?" he asked. "None," responded the archive node. "Change status. Escalate to active watch." The node acknowledged with a descending tone. Malric's gaze lingered on a looped broadcast, one of the Varn mock commentary reels. In the background, a Varn adolescent mimicked Castle's intonation, while stuttering through ceremonial vows, his crest curled inward mid-sentence. Within the deep semantics observatory, Duran stood alone before the echo chamber. He pressed one palm against the containment glass, feeling the temperature differential bleed into his bones. Behind the wall, the original Theta Miric 9 waveform floated on a light column, still for now. It pulsed not like a sound, but like memory. Not heard but remembered, designed not to scream, but to erode. "They think language is for speaking," Duran whispered. He turned away. Behind him the system tagged another feed burst. This time, it was from an inner council member, using his voice for satire in a diplomatic skit. The pattern had become irreversible. In the skies over Theraxis, ad satellites blinked. Their motion tracked civilian traffic, but their feeds now prioritized content with high engagement. Duran Castle's sequence line ranked first in 12 sectors, translated, distorted, fractured, but alive in every tonal variant. Earth still hadn't issued a statement, and in a chamber lit only by waveform light, Theta Miric 9 finally exhaled a silent cascade, a passive pulse, not attack, not weapon, just reaction. The seed had been planted, and it was already blooming. "Lock neural pathing," Duran said, voice low but unhesitant. The terminal responded in silence. No tone, no flash, just a soft vibration under the skin of the biometric console as his authorization rippled through the system like ink dispersing into cold water. Beyond the reinforced pane, the chamber's walls slid apart, revealing the core, a suspended column of translucent alloy housing the dormant seed of Theta Miric 9. The quantum phonetic core within it spun slowly, silent, with threads of light curling and vanishing across its surface, each flicker a buried signal, each loop a dormant sequence waiting for activation. Duran didn't move. His palm remained pressed to the console, sensing not pressure but resistance, like something on the other side refused to be disturbed until absolutely necessary. "Confirmation logged," came the voice of Baron Das, not from a speaker, but from across the chamber. He stood just beyond the central scaffold, wrist embedded into a heads-up data strip, scrolling layers of linguistic feedback. He didn't look up. "The waveform has reached adaptive recursion," Baron continued, flicking one finger through the interface. "Mimicry volume crossed threshold yesterday. We're beyond containment." The data unfurled between them, not symbols, structures, nodes linking to nodes, phoneme anchors replicated in over 80 tonal languages, patterns rebroadcasted not just by organics, but by synthetic relays. A full-spectrum web built unintentionally by those who laughed. "They've duplicated the inflection chain," Baron said, his voice measured. "Not the sound, the sequence. That's what matters." Duran's eyes lingered on the spinning core. It didn't glow, it shimmered. A living rhythm woven into quiet. "It's not a virus," he said. "It's an error they trained themselves to hear." Baron moved closer, pulling up the latest spread map. The console displayed a fractal geometry of accent propagation networks, cultural echoes bouncing off relay towers and entertainment archives, bleeding from feeds into classrooms and civic ceremonies. It had gone beyond satire. The sound was now tradition. Even their artificial instructors are looping it, Barron said. Auto-intonation bots have adopted the stress marker. They've encoded it into self, Duran replied, which means we can't extract it. The words lingered in the chilled air. Outside the chamber, the hallway remained motionless. No guards, no surveillance teams, just rows of locked cognition vaults and pulse sync absorbers humming quietly in their containment beds. Barron tapped a retinal command into the floor plate. The walkway beneath them shifted, revealing a secondary chamber lined with vertical archives. Shelves glided apart, and a file-bearing drone descended, its frame marked with old Terran Council insignia, half faded from disuse. The drone stopped at Duran's side, extending a data stick etched with the serial code, TM9 Prot Active Seed 00. The original voice print sequence, Barron said. The one we recorded from you in the Echo trials 12 years ago. Duran took it, holding the small object between two fingers. It was heavier than it should have been. They forgot language was a weapon, Barron said quietly. We remembered. Duran didn't answer. Within the adjoining observation cell, Malric Sen stood before the response tracking grid. The display streamed sector-by-sector latency updates, semantic mutation patterns, and global alignment ratios. The numbers weren't just climbing, they were stabilizing. That was worse. He keyed in a private subroutine, isolating a playback from a frontier world. In it, two Varn broadcasters attempted a formal chant. Both broke rhythm mid-intonation, losing pitch alignment, and scrambling syllable formation. The feed terminated with a silent error message. Malric exhaled once and tagged the anomaly as adaptive mirror failure, confirmed. Then he accessed the override panel and marked Theta Miric 9 as no longer observational. Status active directive. The room acknowledged with a low-frequency pulse through the floor, a confirmation meant not for ears but for memory. The system didn't need volume. It needed resonance. Back inside the main chamber, Duran placed the seed file into the core interface. A single light ignited at the base, red, unwavering. Then another joined above it, and another. Barron didn't speak. He knew what would follow. Not destruction, not fire, but erosion. The kind that starts inside the voice and works backward into thought. They'll think we retaliated, he said eventually. We didn't, Duran replied. He stepped back from the console. The activation didn't release a wave. It opened a door. The system was built to wait, he continued. We knew one day someone would weaponize mockery. All we did was ensure the mirror faced them. The core now pulsed in rhythm with the root cadence of Kossel's Terran stress pattern, stable, encoded, irreversible. Barron turned away. His gaze drifted toward the chamber's observation window, where the outer corridor reflected faint, narrow lights that barely reached the floor. Shadows didn't flicker. They stretched. No statements, he asked. In the background, the system began to synchronize its output loop. Embedded nodes across subgalactic relay points would start broadcasting not speech, but tone, not content, but cadence. They wouldn't even notice, not at first, and that was the point. One misstep in sound, copied across civilizations, had become the mechanism of collapse, not through force, through mimicry. Earth hadn't sent a fleet, it had sent a pattern, and now, in this quiet lab buried beneath layers of frost and time, that pattern had been acknowledged, not released, acknowledged, as if the universe had finally replied to a joke it didn't understand, and the punchline was silence. Repeat the word, the instructor said, gesturing toward the glyph strip. The student blinked. Her crest adjusted, unsure. She stared at the shimmering word form projected on the heads-up slab, 6 symbols forming the term for unity. Common, daily use. Memorized before the 3rd cycle of education. She opened her mouth. Thra, thra, her voice trailed off. The instructor tilted his head. Again, from the top. She inhaled, exhaled, tried again. Thra, fra, lis, silence. The cadence was wrong. Her tone dipped when it should have climbed, and the middle vowel unraveled like pulled thread. He tapped the reset on the slab. It's all right, it happens, but it didn't. Not in 6 rotations of teaching. Outside the academy windows, Banners fluttered against static field barriers. School broadcasts filtered through rooftop relays, each anchored to the local syntax core. The stream continued uninterrupted. Yet inside the classroom, 20 other students had begun mumbling, not out of disobedience, but hesitation. Their mouths worked through forgotten syllables like tongues, tasting a bitter trace of something once familiar. Torvek Hun stepped back from the council dais. The floor beneath him vibrated with the faint calibration tone of the chamber, a residual feature designed to center linguistic harmonics. He couldn't find his opening phrase. Behind the dais, 3 assistants reviewed his speech notes, but Torvek waved them off. His teleprompter fed clean syntax to his implant. The words were clear. The delivery should have been routine. Kaun. He stopped, jaw tightening. The Khan convened. He exhaled sharply. A second attempt caught in his throat like gravel. The tonal alignment felt off, as if his own language had tilted. Its center of gravity shifted sideways. The audience didn't laugh. Not this time. They sat motionless, silent, curious. One delegate leaned slightly forward, eyes narrowing. Torvek turned, walked off stage, didn't wait for summary protocols. Inside his private quarters, he dropped the modulator necklace onto the table and stared at the mirror plate embedded in the wall. His reflection blinked once, then glitched. Just a frame, just enough. His recorded test phrase played softly in the background. Even his own voice sounded foreign. In the Varn Central Broadcast Hall, a studio technician watched the anchor stutter through the midday updates. Simple segment, agricultural yield report, civic infrastructure stats, ambassadorial movements, nothing complex. But the anchor paused 3 times mid-sentence, each time on a different word, each one a foundation word, part of core grammar, words a hatchling would know, words like open, time, here. The technician leaned forward. Play that segment again. The system looped it. The same moment, hesitation, correction, hollow tone. He scrubbed backward, adjusted filter settings, and viewed earlier broadcasts, last week's files, uncompressed, one by one, and the glitch was there, not technical, linguistic. He reached for the console to file a soft alert. The heads-up panel froze for half a second, then rebooted. No reason, no warning, just reset. In an outer district language academy, instructor Phil Tovar repeated a ceremonial phrase 3 times into a pronunciation calibration node. Each time the system flagged the syllable count as incomplete. Tovar adjusted breathing, re-centered posture, and tried again. Etharn Vissa. A 5th attempt failed. The node blinked orange. He pulled up the system log. The waveform analysis showed a dropout, an auditory flattening in the vowel loop, specifically around a Terran stress signature. He froze. Terran. He hadn't referenced Terran patterns in years, not since the mock speech segments flooded the substreams after the linguistics convergence. He opened a comparative scan, layering his own cadence over archived segments from the Castle clip. They matched. Not fully, but enough. He tapped a request into the Academic Council channel. It returned with an auto-reject. Linguistic anomaly flagged for review. Await diagnostic cycle. The warning lights dimmed. The node powered down. In a maintenance corridor beneath the Bureau of Phonetic Policy, 2 repair technicians worked on a feedback circuit for council broadcast routers. One of them, Joran Vel, hummed an old chant to himself while recalibrating the phase sync, an idle habit he'd picked up from his father's work songs. The second technician paused. Do that again. Joran looked up. What? The line you just said. Joran frowned, replayed it aloud. It's nothing, just filler, rhythm tool. No, the drop, did you feel it? They both paused, then recited the line together. Halfway through, they stumbled. At the same moment, no cue, no change, just failure to finish the sound. One of them laughed, uneasy, the other didn't. By evening, system logs across 5 departments included flagged entries under recursive syntax error, undefined cause, minor reports, low priority, but each one involved voice, speech, understanding. The language servers in Archive Sector 12 requested an unscheduled vocabulary reload. The educational AI assistant on Station RAL 2 began offering incorrect definitions. Ritual recorders malfunctioned during a naming ceremony. A choir's entire performance dropped tone after the 4th stanza, silently, then collectively. Across the Varn Dominion, Subtle cracks had begun to web through its oldest foundation, shared sound. No attack had come, no enemy had arrived. Just a whisper, copied and copied again, until meaning bent, and still, no one noticed the pattern. No one thought it odd that every anomaly echoed the same root. They blamed fatigue, faulty programming, poor diet. But deep in the data, buried under corrected transcriptions and emergency resets, the system knew. "Speak the oath," ordered the council speaker. But nothing came. Across the marble basin of the Varn Parliament, silence rippled louder than any outburst. Dozens of vocal relays flickered on the tiered heads-up displays, each pulsing red with unresolved packets. Language, their most sacred instrument, had fractured without warning. "Begin again," the speaker tried, jaw clenched, voice trembling beneath what used to be command. One sentence. Delegate Yavril tapped his vocal modulator, lips parting for the phrase etched into every Varn child by age 6. Instead, static. A short vowel escaped. Garbled. Choked. "Record this," the speaker muttered, waving toward the console clerk. The clerk's console did not respond. Its speech recognition matrix requested a phonetic reboot and flagged the audio as corrupted. The Varn legislative body, host to 3,000 generational lawmakers, stood mute before its own history. No one panicked. "Not yet," they whispered. They blamed calibration drift, echo fatigue, a transient failure in the resonance grid. Nothing permanent, but they didn't notice their whispers looped, and the loops never aligned. Inside Military Command Vault 4, Doxic Pole barked orders through the encrypted headset, his talons jabbing at fleet route diagrams scrawled across the tactical slab. 3 trade flotillas were stranded in a negotiation corridor, their command vessels reporting full loss of comms with neutral stations. "Redirect relay vectors along gridline 13, and," his voice cut out mid-command. A stunned lieutenant froze. "Repeat that, Commander." Doxic tried again. "Realign signal cascade transmit to," the next word disintegrated in his throat. Not pain, not blockage, just absence. Like reaching for a memory that had never been stored, he stepped back, swallowed, attempted to recalibrate his tone. The lieutenant leaned in. "You said cascade to, what?" Doxic opened his mouth. Nothing formed. The fleet's tactical system chirped a warning. The heads-up display cycled through pending orders, each command truncated at the 4th word. Auto-syntax modules lit up with looping correction alerts, then they shut down. "Are you?" the lieutenant began. Doxic turned, eyes unfocused, and collapsed. His lips still moved, but not a single word followed. In the diplomatic tower over Varn's eastern trade sector, 2 ambassadors sat across from a neutral envoy. The contract had been approved. Agriculture nodes, water right exchanges, mutual relief corridors. The treaty was written, confirmed. The Varn ambassador opened his mouth to finalize the deal, but his affirmation phrase reversed itself halfway through. The envoy frowned. "I beg your," the second Varn delegate attempted recovery, repeating the final clause. The word axis stuttered 4 times, then ended in a slurred glottal burst. The envoy stood, cautiously. "Is this a tactic?" Neither responded. Not because they refused, because their language had slipped through a gap they couldn't perceive, like walking through a door only to find the hallway behind them no longer exists. Trade routes stalled, not from violence, from incomprehension. Fleet logs filled with mismatched coordinates, orders misread, relays garbled. On planet Vestry 9, a shipping station requested backup supplies and received a bulk order of voting consoles instead. On Euler Station, a flight control AI broadcast navigation instructions in partial fragments, half Varn, half Terran cadence, none syntactically valid. Pilots turned off their receivers, some docked manually, others drifted. A few collided. No one blamed sabotage. They couldn't form the words to accuse. In a rural farming commune, a group of children rehearsed the seasonal recitation used to trigger harvest drones. Their instructor tapped the initiation tone. The children began to speak, but halfway through the command, every drone remained dormant. The words failed to activate the sequence. An old man approached and tried the same line. He stuttered midway, unable to recall the final term. The drones powered down, harvest halted, and so did supply chains. Counselor Sharn Vess recorded an emergency address. The script was embedded in his memory, a civic response to unrest, used hundreds of times in past cycles. He stood before the chamber's display ring, the signal broadcasting to 12 sectors. He began, to all who seek." He paused. The words unraveled in his mouth like thread unraveling from a garment long buried in dust. He tried again, a different sentence. But the more he pushed, the more the words collapsed, like a language engine backfiring against itself. The feed cut. In the central records hall, a maintenance engineer examined audio transcripts from council sessions. 3 hours of logs, only 7 complete words, the rest glitches, silence, or worse, recursive loops. He rewound a segment. Councillor Torvik's voice replayed. We began. We, he scrubbed forward. We. The technician slammed the interface. The system asked, in a static, cracked voice, clarify intent. He didn't answer. He couldn't. Back in the war room of Strategic Command, a backup AI activated emergency override language protocols. It switched to Synthetic Lexicon 3.4, a fail-safe dialect designed for contingency operations. But even the synthetic stream failed to maintain structure. The AI looped for 6 cycles. Authorization path request. It terminated the loop, not by command, by default. It could no longer understand itself, and somewhere beneath archives filled with silent recordings, a forgotten accent echoed inside unclosed files, not loud, not violent, just there. And what had begun as a moment of mockery had now erased the one thing no society survives without: meaning. "Run the waveform again," Tharn Dulix barked, scraping his claws across the diagnostic rail. "From the beginning. Filter everything except the linguistic decay loop." The archive technician's voice cracked under the strain, his throat dry from 12 hours of non-stop playback. The analysis chamber pulsed dimly under low-watt beams, designed to limit heat emissions and preserve historical echo integrity. But nothing about this room felt preserved. Not anymore. On the central slab, a laser plasma display scrolled looping sequences, broken phoneme alignments, stress pattern collapses, recursive vowel chains. The data wasn't random, it followed a structure. That was the worst part. The assistant beside him, young and twitchy, tapped his own headset. "Council requested another copy of the time-stamped clip," he muttered. "They think the glitch originated from last month's council vote, maybe a relay malfunction." "It didn't start there," Tharn interrupted. He waved the assistant off, leaned closer, and isolated a sliver of audio from the old convergence files. The moment of the Varn delegate's now infamous mimicry. His mandibles tightened. The crowd's laughter layered over the mockery like dust settling into a wound. On screen, the waveform shifted, just a trace deviation, subtle and sharp, like a knife's tip brushing the edge of skin. He slowed it by half, then again, and again. "What are you doing?" the assistant asked. Tharn didn't reply. He magnified the frequency, down past the speech layer into tonal markers. The system flagged a buried anomaly, not corruption, not error intent. There it was, a structure within the imitation, not natural, not accidental. A seed. Tharn froze. "Cross-check this pulse with all flagged decay loops from the education grid," he whispered. "Now." The younger technician frowned but obeyed. As the scan ran, a static shiver crawled across the chamber's data spire, then a soft ping echoed from the overhead archive node. "Match found. 97% similarity." He loaded the comparative graph. On the left, the voice clip from Duran Castle, as mocked by Torvik Hun. On the right, a kindergarten teacher in the Western District, stammering through a song. The waveforms aligned perfectly. "By the void," the assistant muttered. Tharn stared at the screen, his stomach twisting. "It's not an error," he said, voice barely audible. "It's a mirror." Every time someone repeated the accent, they weren't mocking a sound, they were activating a signal. He stepped back, palms sweaty against the cold panel surface. The room seemed to contract around him. He reached up, keyed in a restricted level query. Audio route, Earth delegate, theta marker scan. The screen blanked, then flashed red. Restricted level, Earth origin linguistic structure flagged as foreign defense protocol. Theta class confirmation match, 99.998%. The assistant leaned over his shoulder. "Theta class, that's a weapon tag." "No," Tharn murmured. "Worse, that's a system-wide modifier. It doesn't destroy, it rewrites." He opened the archive firewall manually, overriding protocol barriers with a backdoor authentication relic from an old linguistic tribunal case. The data gate cracked, and the playback file surfaced. Durin Castle's original lecture, unfiltered, untouched. He initiated a forensic trace. Waveform density spiked on the second sentence. The phrase, "We speak not for sound, but for sequence," and inside that sequence, buried like a virus in the shell of language, repeating vowel positions, stress markers encoded not to be heard, but mimicked, a semantic disruptor, passive, adaptive. "You're telling me the accent was the delivery system?" the assistant asked. Voice hushed. Tharn nodded. "And the joke, their imitation of it, was how they spread it." He turned toward the ceiling, eyes wide. "They infected themselves." The console buzzed again. Data flooded the display, school recordings, diplomatic speeches, even entertainment loops, all carried the modified cadence. The system fed back a singular line. Infection vector confirmed, multi-source mimicry, decay irreversible. He stared at the timestamp. It dated to the hour Durin Castle was mocked. Tharn's legs gave out. He sat down slowly, the room swimming around him. There was no patch, no command code to halt it. The structure had evolved beyond origin, it now learned. The assistant, shaking, asked, "Can it be reversed?" "No," Tharn answered. "It's not a fire to be put out. It's a dialect now, a way of speaking, a thing they chose to repeat without knowing what it carried." He pulled up the last system tag assigned to Castle's voiceprint. It wasn't marked hostile. It wasn't even categorized as weaponized communication. It was filed under cultural mirror, passive doctrine, last resort, a fail-safe, not to strike, to reflect, and the Varn had screamed their laughter straight into its mouth. Behind him, the assistant backed toward the doorway. "What do we do?" Tharn stared at the screen one last time. The waveform now looped on its own, not part of the playback. The system was repeating it, adapting, echoing. He turned slowly, voice dry and flat. "We don't do anything." He paused. "Because they already did." "Say something," the father signed, palms trembling, eyes wet with confusion. "Anything." His son opened his mouth. "Only breath." The word never formed. Wind drifted through the broken arch of the Varn City Plaza, an open square once alive with rhythmic chants and spiral harmony songs that marked the solar ascent. Now only shadows stretched across stone. No songs rose, no syllables clung to the morning air. A group of elders gathered near the memory spire, hands outstretched in the old greeting shape, palm to palm, fingers parted in triform. But the gesture collapsed halfway, fingers uncertain, arms falling limply. No one remembered the full pattern. Without the chant to anchor it, the motion meant nothing. They lowered their hands, one by one, then walked away in silence. Inside the Hall of Names, the last archivist sat before the ceremonial registry. The headpiece rested on the floor. The robe lay unfolded at his feet. The central console's heads-up projection glitched once, then froze, name log empty, vocal input offline. He raised the ritual marker. Its tip hovered above the stone. His mouth shaped the syllables meant to begin the naming rite. None arrived. He pressed the stylus to the surface anyway. But without the name spoken, the mark was meaningless. He set it down gently, then closed the registry forever. On the Highland farms, drones flickered against failing syntax prompts. Children approached the control slabs, repeating startup commands from memory. Their voices faltered, instructions fragmented. Machines didn't move. A girl sat beside the harvest mechanism and simply cried. Her father joined her and reached to console. She tried to ask what was wrong. From orbit, the council's observation relay panned over sector after sector. Silent thoroughfares, speechless markets, abandoned forums, not devastation, no fire, no chaos, just stillness, the kind that arrives only when meaning dies. When you can no longer speak your name, it begins to fade from the mind. Without names, families forget who they are. Without greetings, friends forget how to meet. Without instructions, cities forget how to function. And without memory, a people dissolves. In a northern temple, priests once tuned their voices to the harmonic lattice of the wind columns, vocal resonance used to cleanse collective grief. The final rites were scheduled, but when the high cantor stepped forward, script in hand, the chant refused to rise. His mouth moved. The notes fled, and the wind passed through empty columns unshaped, wild and unclaimed. He bowed his head. The others followed, then dispersed in silence. On a distant commune ridge, a circle of elder scholars met to record what little was left. One scrawled phonetic fragments onto a crude tablet. Another attempted gestural short form to recreate a greeting. The youngest among them pointed at a diagram, his way of asking the name of the object drawn. No one replied, not because they didn't wish to, because their memory had swallowed the sound. Without words, the image meant nothing, and slowly, even the image began to blur in their minds. Counselor Vress sat alone in his chamber, reviewing old meeting transcriptions. He traced the curve of a word once spoken by his brother. The letters were clean, the meaning sharp, the memory vivid, but when he tried to say it aloud, it came out flat, empty. His mouth, trained by decades of rhetoric, no longer obeyed. The muscles twitched, the breath escaped, but the shape of meaning never returned. He closed the record. He stood, walked to the chamber's window, and stared out at a city of silent towers, waiting for voices that would never rise again. At the central transport junction, commuters moved through tunnels, silent and slow, like ghosts navigating relics. Digital signage flickered instructionless, replaced by static shapes. Ticket counters froze in prompt loops. Announcers sat mute, their heads bowed. No one spoke, no one needed to. They had learned to walk without asking, to look without explaining, to touch without describing. This wasn't adaptation, it was surrender. One final gathering took place in the Varnian Forum of Unity, a place built for dialogue, for layered sound. Once the harmonics of political discourse echoed here across polished stone. Now the chamber was filled, but not a single voice rose. The delegates sat, hands folded, mouths closed. The heads-up display activated automatically, awaiting speech input. It waited, and waited, then dimmed. One delegate stood. He gestured loosely, nothing formal, just a flick of fingers toward his heart. An old sign for apology, or farewell. No one responded. Eventually, they left the chamber, one by one, their footsteps softer than silence. Across the Dominion, life remained, but language did not. Send the appeal again. Use the archaic protocol if you have to. Yarantov stood motionless in the diplomatic chamber, eyes fixed on the silent comm tower beyond the obsidian viewport. His voice had dropped to a whisper, not from weakness, but from the weight of watching an entire species disappear behind its own silence. The aides behind him shifted nervously, unsure whether to acknowledge the order or pretend they hadn't heard what he wasn't supposed to say out loud. We'll encode it with Sigma band etiquette headers, one finally offered. Earth used them back during the Olari Accord response cycles. Maybe it will bypass the block. Yaren didn't answer. He stepped forward, reaching toward the console. His hand hovered above the interface, hesitating, not from fear but from the burden of being the one to ask again. The heads-up display shimmered to life, requesting authorization for a Tier 1 interstellar diplomatic transmission. He keyed in his clearance, voice identification failing, text input required. He didn't flinch. He typed manually. Emergency ethical request. Code designation. Pan-galactic communicative catastrophe origin. Varn Dominion on behalf of non-verbalized civilizational class target. Earth Deep. Semantics Division Passive Response Branch. Undeclared subject. Request for human linguistic remediation assistance. Subtext embedded. They no longer speak. They no longer understand. There are no threats, only consequences. We ask not for reversal, but for grace. Yaren pressed send. The transmission vanished into the encrypted relay. No reply followed. 4 hours later, the Council's Ethics Review Board convened in silence. No one used vocal projection. Every official wore relay cuffs. The words appeared on shared screens in short-form phrases, stripped of nuance, cleansed of voice. Yaren read each one. Earth has remained non-responsive, across 12 separate vectors. Intercept logs confirm all messages were received. No acknowledgements, no denials, only silence. One entry caught his eye. It wasn't from the ethics board. It had been appended anonymously, logged through an outdated channel. They mocked a sound. They never understood it was a key. Attached was an archive file. Origin Field Unit 9. A Castle Interface Node Date. The hour following Earth's representative departure from the convergence. No audio, just that text. No one knew how the file surfaced. It wasn't part of any official archive. No one questioned the authenticity, because everyone recognized the name, Castle. The council chamber's artificial light dimmed as evening protocols initiated. Delegates from neutral territories drifted to the viewing level, staring out at the silent dominion below, worlds reduced to gesture, motion, survival. Across the floor, a young comm officer whispered, not in formality, but in disbelief, "Why wouldn't they respond? Earth, they always respond." Yaren didn't look at him. "You think they did nothing, but this was their response. But they didn't send fleets, they didn't issue warnings, no demands, just a pause." Yaren interrupted, a space between sentences where a word should have gone. The comm officer frowned. "What kind of doctrine does that?" Yaren's voice dropped. "One built on the premise that language is not a tool, it's a trigger." He walked toward the archive terminal, pulled the sealed diplomatic capsule from his satchel, and placed it into the final relay dock. "What is that?" the officer asked. "A record," Yaren said, "for when the next civilization forgets the cost of turning another's voice into comedy." He keyed the seal open. Inside, just one entry. Duran Castle's name. No rank, no office, just the text. They mocked a sound. They never understood it was a key. Far beneath Earth's southern pole, inside a sealed corridor, where even photons required clearance, a relay light blinked once, then darkened. Nothing moved. The system acknowledged receipt. No command followed. No counter-transmission emerged. The silence was not oversight. It was posture. Back at the council hub, an emergency ethics panel debated whether to classify Earth as hostile. No one spoke. Too many had lost fluency. Arguments came in fragments, stripped of vocal tone, lacking rhythm, devoid of persuasive force. Finally, the panel defaulted to an automated motion status: subject inert, influence irreversible, assistance not viable. Yaren sat back in his chair, rubbing the side of his temple. The word inert echoed in his mind, hollow and cold. They had called Earth inert, a species whose silence could unravel another's entire sense of self, not through war, not through violence, but through letting others hear what they had once refused to understand. In the final transmission log, Earth's status remained unchanged. Only the final note, embedded in the archive under permanent preservation authority: Castle, Field Note 9. A status, fulfilled directive, passive deterrent, activated via external mockery response requirement. None. The mockery had triggered the doctrine. Input final sequence. Manual authentication, Duran said, fingers resting calmly on the console frame. The lights in the chamber didn't flicker. They dimmed in calibrated succession, one after the other, like an eye narrowing against the weight of knowing what it's about to witness. He stood in the heart of the subharmonic cognition core, surrounded by silent systems that hadn't spoken in decades, yet listened to everything. Behind him, the recording array stabilized. Earth's internal relay had already received the last of the Council's diplomatic filings. No response had been sent. There never would be. The heads-up display projected a quiet reel from the Varn Dominion, an orbital shot from their own surveillance craft. Entire cities visible, silent. An overhead passage across one of their cultural hubs revealed streets where statues stood taller than the citizens who now walked with heads lowered. No words rising, no greetings offered. It wasn't mourning, it wasn't surrender, it was the absence of memory. And Duran watched. Every frame. He folded his hands behind his back. The air inside the command center carried a faint mineral bite, like distilled glacial vapor pulled from deep ice veins. The kind of air that preserved rather than eroded, like the air that had once carried his accent to the ears of those who didn't bother to understand it. He leaned forward. "Log session," he murmured. A soft tone echoed from the slab. A red glyph pulsed once in the center of the console. "Rec active. One entry only." He didn't look at the recording module. He looked at the waveform panel. Blank. Waiting. "I was never meant to speak to them," he said quietly. "My presence at the convergence wasn't for diplomacy. It was a final measure placed in reach, just close enough for someone foolish enough to strike." The console registered his voice print, still unchanged, still bearing that trace inflection they had once turned into ridicule. He knew the systems would match it across thousands of now silent syllables spoken by alien mouths. "They thought language was a mirror," he continued, voice unwavering. that by reflecting ours back at us, twisted and mangled, they proved superiority. But Earth never built mirrors. We built locks. The room didn't hum. It didn't vibrate. It listened. Duran stepped to the side. The console dimmed, switching from visual feed to audio overlay. Behind him, the orbital replay froze on a single image, the Varn Council's empty speaking chamber, seats filled, mouths closed, expressions hollow. Mockery was the activation, he said, but silence was always the end state. They unlocked what they didn't understand, a sequence embedded not in our words, but in our cadence. And cadence is not taught, it's inherited. He looked up. They learned it by laughing. The console requested confirmation for log finalization. Confirm final word. He didn't press it. Not yet. He walked to the edge of the chamber, where a small secondary panel ran an internal Earth-only simulation. The heads-up display revealed sectors across Earth's linguistic zones. All clear. No syntactic decay. No mimic feedback loops. Earth's protocols had held. The firewall stood. He tapped the console. The simulation closed. They had survived not by defense, but by foresight, by preparing the one thing no adversary had trained themselves to understand, respect for the intangible. He returned to the core module. The recording glyph blinked once more, awaiting his last line. He didn't deliver it immediately. He waited. He let the silence stretch until it became the atmosphere itself. Then he leaned forward and spoke, clearly, quietly. Finally, silence has always been our final word. He tapped the panel. The recording ended. The glyph faded. The waveform returned to zero. No secondary logs activated. No transmissions were scheduled. The system entered conservation state. He removed his interface badge, set it gently on the panel, and turned toward the exit. The corridor beyond the chamber lit with passive strip lines, casting a faint bluish glow onto the floor, enough to guide, never to intrude. He walked with even steps, not fast, not reluctant. His pace was the rhythm of someone who had fulfilled every function his presence demanded. As he neared the exit gate, the rear data wall displayed the final archive summary. Sequence complete. Doctrine satisfied. No further engagement required. Earth status. Dormant observer. He passed beneath it without looking back. Above Earth's pole, satellites adjusted for passive silence. No beams, no pings, no lures. Across the galaxy, old allies noted the lack of Earth's voice with unease. Neutral zones speculated. Theories spun, but no official word came. None would, not again. The seed had bloomed. The mirror had been shown, and Earth, unchanged in tone, but permanent in consequence, returned to its original state, watching, remembering, speaking only when the weight of silence would be more final than any war. The last human word spoken into that archive now lived not as history, but as architecture. It had shaped the fall of a civilization, not with violence, but with voice, and the absence of it.